This Spot Bitcoin ETF update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest crypto asset manager. Spot Bitcoin ETFs are continuing to see record inflows in the United States, but they've caused a regulatory ripple effect around the world. Joining First Mover now to chat about that is CryptoQuant Head of Research, Julio Moreno. Julio, welcome to First Mover.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, let's talk about these inflows. Breaking records, it feels like every single time I see a new report on the inflows. What are you making of all of the interest and excitement over here in the United States?
The ETF launch in the USA has been a total success. It was really above anyone's expectations so far. 2024 in terms of inflows, in terms of capital that has flowed into these products. And we have now record holdings of Bitcoin in these ETFs, over 800,000, including GBTC. And that's 4% of the total supply of Bitcoin. So it's quite impressive.
Julio, it was a regulatory, I want to say nightmare, but regulatory battle leading up to this, a 10-year-long battle that really came to this approval because of a lawsuit that was brought on by Grayscale. Talk to me about what we're seeing from the rest of the world now. Like I said in my introduction, there was a regulatory ripple effect happening. We got some news out of the UK, Thailand, and Hong Kong. How's the rest of the world reacting to this from a regulatory perspective?
Once these ETFs are approved, in the US, which is by far the biggest market, other markets, other countries may look at this launching this type of products because of the US legitimizing, Bitcoin through these ETFs. So, of course, there's going to be, a push in other countries, in other industries, to have their own product, right? Because they don't want to be left behind, right? Because if you don't launch this type of products in other countries, in other financial centers, then probably that capital is going to come to the US, right? So it's also a competition, it's a race for the flow of capital.
I mentioned a few different regions just a few minutes ago that are now looking at ETF products for either retail or institutional investors. Hong Kong is one of them. Why are you watching Hong Kong? What's so special about Hong Kong?
First of all, because Asia is a really big market in general for crypto. Asia, countries like South Korea, Japan, they're really big markets in terms of trading volume for crypto. So that's one thing. There's a lot of investment potential from Asia. And then Hong Kong, relatively recently, they passed, let's say, crypto-friendly regulations. They launch a license for exchanges to come to Hong Kong to operate, on a regulated way. So I think, in terms of regulation, everything's in place in Hong Kong. And so now they are seeing the success in the US, so they want to replicate that. And of course, Hong Kong being, a financial center, a major financial center. So it's really, really important.
Let's talk about the Spot ETH ETF now. We can't talk about the Spot Bitcoin ETF without talking about the Spot ETH ETF. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are here, because more and more as the days go on, a lot of people who come on the show are saying they're actually a little bit skeptical if we'll see a Spot ETH ETF here in the United States in May. With all of this interest from other countries, do you think that it's possible we'll see a Spot ETH ETF approved somewhere else before it's approved here in the United States?
Well, I've been reading, especially in Hong Kong, they're really working to launch this Spot ETH ETF. So, and I think that because the US, they got their first mover advantage with Bitcoin, right? maybe some other places will like to have that, but for Ethereum, right? And so I think that makes sense for other places, like Hong Kong, which has already, clear regulations, to launch another, the second largest crypto, right, as a spot ETF that will give them like the first mover advantage. So I think that I think in other countries it's going to be probably could be like first to the US, for Ethereum spot ETF.
Do you think that will actually matter though? And the reason I ask is because the US wasn't actually the first mover to the
Mhm.
spot Bitcoin ETF. There were other regions who had one, Canada as an example, and there
Mhm.
wasn't this much excitement. There wasn't this much inflow going into the Canadian spot Bitcoin ETF. So, do you think it actually matters if there's a spot Ether ETF that pops up somewhere around the world before the US gets approval, or is the US the market that really actually um, pushes the rest of the globe to make a move?
Of course, the US is, by far the largest market. So that's one thing that they have to their favor, right? But also the others, the previous Bitcoin spot ETFs were launched, and we were not really in the bull market, right? So that has an effect. We went to this bear market in 2022, so that people or institutions weren't really want to have exposure, right, to Bitcoin during the bear market. So now that we are really in a bull market, there's a lot of more interest, right? So if you launch a spot Ethereum ETF in this moment, because we are in a bull market, that people want to have exposure, or institutions really want to have exposure, and it's part of the cycle, right? So that's the difference, I would say, between the Bitcoin spot ETF that were launched previously in other regions. In the US, they were launched as we were really in a bull market. So that will be the difference.
Do you think that central banks will start buying Bitcoin with all of this excitement around the ETFs, governments and regulators looking at Bitcoin a little bit differently? Do you think that's in our future?
I would say that if they ever do that, they will be the last to do it. I don't think that they want to legitimize Bitcoin that much, in that way. It's a progression, of course. Individuals adopted Bitcoin first, then there came some funds, and then they came companies, right, like MicroStrategy, and then we have now these large wealth managers. So it's a progression. In that progression, I guess, if that ever happens, the central banks will be, I guess, the last ones to do that.
You brought up MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy was in the news yesterday wanting to
Mhm.
buy even more Bitcoin as
Mhm.
Bitcoin recently reached all-time highs. I know I just asked you if you think we'll see central banks start buying Bitcoin, but do you think more companies are watching Michael Saylor, they're watching MicroStrategy, and they're thinking, there's something here to what he's doing, and might start diversifying their business to follow suit?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the broader adoption of Bitcoin by corporations is one of the things that could drive this cycle. Now we have like this, successful example of what MicroStrategy has done, right? And also, I was reading from Bitwise, that who's buying, or who's gonna buy this ETF, and they were seeing like they were being asked by corporations also, to have exposure via this ETF. So I think that that's happening as we speak. They are definitely considering having exposure to Bitcoin, whether it's having the actual Bitcoin, or through these ETFs is another possibility. But yeah, it's definitely something that I think is gonna continue, the adoption of Bitcoin as a balance sheet asset for corporations.
All right, Julio, I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball for me. If you look at the rest of 2024, what do you think is going to happen next with, I'm going to make it a little bit easier for you, with Bitcoin or with the ETFs?
Well, for Bitcoin, I mean, we are heading to the halving, right? And in past cycles, the halving has always this effect of accelerating the price run. So, I mean, from that perspective, we could expect like Bitcoin continue to gain in terms of pricing. And so, and of course, if demand from these ETFs continues to grow as it has been, that's really driving, the demand for Bitcoin. Of course, it will be reflected on price. So yeah, I think it's, in general, positive year for Bitcoin.
Julio, thank you so much for joining First Mover today and sharing your perspectives.
Thank you for inviting me.